Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sankofa Summer School. I am the founder of Sankofa Summer School, Dr. Michelle Taylor, and I'm very excited because this is the fifth year that we have started this program. Um, since we started this program. Thank you all for joining. I want to make sure that the comments work. So if you could put like a 1 in the chat to let me know that you all are here, and I can see that there's a few of you here. I just want to make sure that the comments work because that's how we're going to be able to do the Q&A and things like that. Okay, great. I can see people. Awesome. Because sometimes, you set it up and things get weird. So very happy to have you all here today for class. If you have never been to Sankofa Summer School before, you are in for a treat. Each night, we are doing a different class on a different topic. They range in everything from art, media, culture, history, identity, health, wellness, all those kinds of things. And so I'm really, really honored that you are joining us. I'm honored that so many people joined up. And I think we're going to have a really great session. So today, kicking this off, many of you know that I am a professor and my focus is on all kinds of things, but mainly Black cinema and particularly the depictions of Black mothers. But I'm also looking a lot at Black women. I'm looking at how Black culture is depicted and all those things. So one of my favorite, honestly, my favorite genre of films is Blaxploitation. And so that's why I decided to do a class this year to kind of talk a bit more about Blaxploitation. I think that there are a lot of misconceptions about Blaxploitation. There's a lot of warranted criticism of Blaxploitation, but I think that once people fully understand what it is, it might move and become your favorite as well. All right. So I'm gonna set up and share my screen and all these things. I don't actually want to be that small, so we're okay with this. If this format works for people, then we will go with that. All right. Okay, so let's dig in. So what are we going to be discussing today? Okay, look, I got an agenda, but listen, folks, I may hop around, but there's so much to cover, and I really want to make sure that I'm giving you the history of things because the class is about how Blaxploitation saved Hollywood, but I need you to get there. So you have to get a little bit of that background. So let me give you a little bit of film history. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the racism in media, and that's super important, and it plays a role into why Blaxploitation becomes as popular as it is. We're going to talk about the impact on Hollywood and Black America. We're going to talk a little bit about some race movies, and then I'm going to give you we're going to discuss some films individually because everybody loves to talk about the films, right? Superfly, Foxy Brown, and others. And then I'm going to give you some resources. I think that these workshops are really great because we like to have our students have some takeaways, okay? As I said, I may move around a little bit, but shout out to that. Looking in the chat, you've never been, you're excited. I'm so happy that you are here. Thank you very much. All right, so let's start. All right, so I think we have to go back to minstrelsy. And minstrelsy comes from this character, Jim Crow, right? Thomas Dartmouth Rice was known as like the father of Jim Crow. And this eventually becomes like this really like unfortunately popular character, right? Historian Dale Cockrell once noted that poor and working class whites kind of felt squeezed out politically, economically, and socially from the top, but also from the bottom. And they're the ones who invented minstrelsy as a way of expressing the oppression that marked being members of the majority, right? White people, but outside of the white norm, okay? So minstrelsy, comedic performances of Blackness by whites is exaggerated in costumes and makeup, and we can't fully separate it from the racial derision and stereotyping at its core, right? By distorting the features and cultures of African Americans, including their looks, language, dance, deportment, and character, white Americans were able to codify whiteness across class and geopolitical lines as its antithesis, okay? So that's a lot of words to basically say poor white people were feeling kind of locked out from the benefits of whiteness. And so they needed to have an other. They needed to make sure that someone was beneath them. and minstrelsy is what ends up happening. Okay, and so I just want to play this clip for you. I'm navigating between screens, so forgive me for that. But here we go.
Every time I wheel about a jump Jim Crow, I went down to the river. I didn't mean to stay, but there I saw so many gals I couldn't get away. Wheel about and turn about and do just so. Every time I wheel about a jump Jim Crow. Give me back my clothes, please. And so it was that a young song and dance man, who was later belovedly known as Daddy Rice, was the first to bring blackface characterization to the American stage.
Okay, so what you see in that presentation is that this idea that this is literally stolen from Black peoples, right? So you have a character there who is actually a Black man, and he's like, give me back my clothes. You've taken my clothes from me. You've taken this art from me, right? But we can't talk about film without talking about the birth of the nation, right? And it's super important because, I'm sorry, one of my cats is here. It's super important to talk about the birth of the nation, arguably one of the most racist pieces of art ever created in the history of the world, right? But also one of the best innovations, right? So this is the first feature-length film that we get, this motion picture, right? And it could, it definitely depicts, uses blackface. Blackface, for those who don't know, is the use of darkening makeup, usually burnt cork, to make a white person appear as though they are a Black person. It featured a lot of really negative stereotypes, like this kind of brute Black man that only wants to, sexually assault women, all those kinds of things. So the film directly contributed to the revival of the Ku Klux Klan in 1915. And that is kind of something that people don't know. The Klan existed in the 1800s, but Georgia and South Carolina enacted laws to suppress them because they were terrorizing people too much. And during the Reconstruction, the US government was actually trying to help Black people. So the Klan was kind of pushed into the background. But this film served as propaganda to bring them back. And they felt emboldened and encouraged. And then that's when we start to see the wave of lynchings that would take place in the early part of the 20th century. Okay. And then we get to what's called the Red Summer of 1919, which across the country, cities across the country, these different riots and attacks break out directly as a result of this propaganda and this really disgusting film. And it's 3 hours of disgusting mess. And I'm always going to teach it in that way. I'm never going to sugarcoat it. All right. So what you're looking at now are some of the images from early minstrel shows, right? So you can see how white men would darken their skin. And these are some of the advertisements that they would have. And people came to these shows in droves. White people loved this shit. Okay, I'm sorry, excuse my language. Ooh, it's 14 plus, y'all understand, okay? White people loved this stuff. They loved to be able to come together and ridicule African Americans, people who still had living people that had been enslaved, okay? The first generation after enslavement, second generation after enslavement, right? This is what they loved, and this is what they found funny, okay? And I just want to remind everybody in 2025, this is still a thing for a lot of white people. They really enjoy ridiculing African Americans in film and television and other types of media, right? So in this clip I'm going to show you, you're going to see a clip of the character known as Step and Fetch It. This is from 1934. Step and Fetch It, played by a man, Lincoln Perry. Lincoln Perry became the first Black millionaire in Hollywood. Okay, he made a lot of money. And you think about $1 million back then, that was a lot of money. He made a lot of money playing this character. I have a different take on Step and Fetch It than most people do. But Step and Fetch It is often said to be this really exploited, just really derogatory depiction of Black men. And I just want to play this clip for you, and I'll give you why I think I have a different read on this, okay?
looking for? Where'd you learn to be a barber?
In jail.
What are you in jail for?
The shaving the gentleman too close. And
Wait a minute! Wait a minute! What are you playing, a maypole dance? And you with a fan down there. Have them throw away their crutches and go to work, will you? I want something bright and snappy. And if I don't get it, the boat leaves Friday.
Okay, pick up. Ready, girls, go. 1, 2.
do like that, Mr. Flowers?
Hmm?
Like me?
What?
Make your face look like mine?
Give me that razor.
I want to get that one, but
Come on. Stand over here and hold it up. Hold it up. Now down. Hold it so I can see.
Mr. Flowers, can I finish that, please?
Whose face am I shaving, yours or mine?
Yours, I think, 'cause mine ain't bleeding.
What's going on here? You look like you need a doctor. I do. Do you know where I can find a real one?
Okay. Right? So I need you to rock with me for something. I need you to rock with me for this, right? Okay. So you just watched Step and Fetch It, right? The way he's playing that slurred speech, like he doesn't know anything. Mind you, Lincoln Parrott's, he's, a Caribbean immigrant and very educated, well-spoken, so-called well-spoken kind of guy, right? He's playing this guy with this slurred speech and he seems like he doesn't know what he's doing, right? What if we watch that as him playing this role subversively? Because what does he end up doing? He gets the white man to cut his own face, right? By pretending that, he's like, well, first thing he asks him is like, do you want your face to look like mine? And there's something subversive in that, right? Like, you don't want to look like a black man, right? And so the man takes the razor and he wants to cut his own face. So he's like not holding the mirror in a way that's helpful to him. And so he ends up surprising him by putting his face there, which causes him to cut his face. And what's the one thing he ended up not having to do? Shave the white man. And so sometimes we have to look at these films. We can be dismissive, but we also have to understand and this is something that is really important. You have to kind of locate people where they are. And going back to that time, right? He's forced in this position to shave this man, ends up, one, not having to do the job, and two, he gets the man to cut himself. Like, that was, to me, like, how did nobody see that, right? So that's just, one of the ways that I happen to read some of the roles that Step and Fetch It has. This is not saying that the character itself wasn't problematic in many ways, but I think that sometimes we have to look at the ways that Black people have survived and have been able to flip these things on white people in ways that maybe even white people don't understand, right? Okay. So as we continue on, we start seeing, they're moving away from just straight up blackface and actually hiring Black actors. And so, like I said, Lincoln Perry, it becomes the first millionaire in Hollywood, and he does those roles. And then we also see, as you can see, let me make that a little bit bigger. We can see Mammy, one of the most popular roles we know. We've got Amos and Andy. We've got Step and Fetch It again up here. This time, in a scene with Black women. These people, this is not like white men in blackface and drag. Oh, white men also did a lot of drag as well. So we start to see these kinds of images, and this is what is being put out into the media, right? But they're not the only ones, right? Then we get someone like Oscar Micheaux. Now, Oscar Micheaux, let me change this a bit. There we go. Oscar Micheaux has the Micheaux Film Corporation. He goes on, he's like one of our earliest independent filmmakers, one of the most prolific Black independent filmmakers. I think the only person who really offers that competition is Spike Lee. And I guess I could say Tyler Perry, but do I want to bring Tyler Perry into this conversation? I'm not really sure. But then you also have the Lincoln Motion Picture Company. You've got Astor Pictures. And at this time, we start getting these films with Black people. There's over 150 companies that are making films about Black people and Black stories. They are not all run by Black people. In fact, there were many white producers and filmmakers who were making these films, right? They were funding them, you know, directing them and things like that, and writing them and such like that. So what they started to realize was that Black people like going to the movies. Black people actually like really enjoy this stuff, right? So we're starting to get like all these different types of films that are coming out, and Black people are making going to the movies like they're like Saturday night delight. Okay, so they're getting their clothes, they're putting on their finest clothes, they getting the pearls, they got the heels, and they are going to the movies. Dinner in the movies becomes a really big thing for Black people, which is why today, like, sometimes you know, you said, what's the note point that poster is saying? I don't know, I can't see. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to keep going because people will be watching this years from now. So I apologize for that. But people are going to these films and it's so like, I mean, it's captivating. And then the other thing is that they're often going to these films and there are musical numbers. So some of their favorite musical artists are appearing. People like Lena Horne and Ethel Waters, they're in these films and they're singing. You're getting Cab Calloway, you're getting all these folks, right? So Black people are starting to see themselves on screen. And this is also important because, you know, film is one of the most powerful mediums because, you know, they say a picture speaks 1,000 words. I don't know why I can't talk today. So Black people in the North are getting images of, you know, folks from the South. Black people in the South are getting images of life in the North. There's all these kinds of things, right? We're learning about the migration. People are seeing, people in Mississippi can go to a movie and see what is life like for Black people that have migrated to Detroit, right? And that also inspires them. And so early Black film becomes a part of this great migration as well. Okay. And I also want to mention that documentaries are being made. Booker T. Washington is filming at Tuskegee and he's using the moving picture to make some of the earliest college advertisements. Okay. So he's making these, he's going around the country showing it, and he's getting people to want to come to Tuskegee because he's made these films. All right. All right. So we have to also think about what else is going on in Hollywood. Hollywood is very puritanical. Okay. A lot of these early films that we see, these ones that they call classics, if you really watch them, you'll see that they are pretty light. Okay, there's not a whole lot going on, but that's because there were these laws. Okay, so a lot of the religious leaders were concerned about the influence, and they used to call these talkies, movies with speaking parts. Okay, Birth of a Nation was not a talkie, it was a silent film, but it was a motion picture. But now we have films where people are actually talking in real time. They're getting a little concerned about the influence, right? So then they came up with these production codes, and they prohibited things like nudity, suggestive dancing. You couldn't make fun of religion, right? You could not depict illegal drug use. There could be no mention of like venereal disease, which that one has always been interesting to me. But I think what they were saying is that if you have a venereal disease, if you had a STD, you were probably having sex outside of marriage or before marriage. And so that's how they thought about it. They wouldn't let you depict childbirth because it would require a woman to be, you know, unclothed. And miscegenation. And if that's a new word to people, miscegenation means marriage and relationships between races. Okay. So you couldn't depict white and Black people being in love. You couldn't depict them being married, right? There were a lot of phrases and words that you couldn't use. Criminal activity could not be presented in a way that led viewers to sympathize with criminals. And that will end up changing, right? Like this idea of like, we rooting for the villain. No, you were not given the opportunity to do that. And then the sanctity of marriage and the home had to be upheld, right? And so this was a pretty big deal, okay? And you couldn't have adultery, none of those things, right? So even though it was necessary to the plot, you couldn't be explicit and you had to have justifications for it, right? So in 1952, though, movies are finally granted free speech under the First Amendment, right? That becomes super important. And then in 1968, Hollywood allows for more flexibility and creativity, right? So they've gotten rid of these codes known as the Hays Codes. And they're like, all right, let's ease up on this. Part of why? You know, I ain't going to the damn movies. They don't want to see this. Okay, think about what's happening in the 1960s, right? Think about what we're experiencing at that time. There's a lot of revolutionary stuff going on. So folks ain't trying to be on no puritanical stuff, right? So then the Motion Picture Association does come up with the rating system that we all pretty much know now, G, PG, PG-13, all those kinds of things, right? But then what we realize is that pretty much the Hollywood starts to be in decline. The golden age is kind of done. Some of the reasons why, okay, first of all, television, right? Think about the impact that streaming has had on films. Same thing with television. If I can watch this in my home, why am I going outside and paying money when I could just turn on my TV and get it for free, right? And especially as televisions became more accessible, you know, Hollywood was like, what's going on, right? Another thing was kind of like, you know, looking at the baby boomers. There's a lot more people, right? Younger people, more people are going to college. People are, you know, having different tastes in their entertainment. We're starting to get rock and roll, right? Rock and roll is starting to change people. People are into jazz. They're into all these things. They're like, not that old classic kind of Hollywood thing is no longer appealing to people. Think about it. The Vietnam War, the LGBTQ movement, civil rights, the women's movement, all of these things are making people not want to go to the movies and hear about Jesus. We don't actually care about these old wars or anything like that, you know? The other thing that was going on is that they were trying to make blockbusters and it wasn't working out. Like the money that they were spending for this newer, you know, as technology is advancing, wasn't happening. There, people were just like, nah, we're not going. And so they weren't making their money back. So that starts to become a thing. One good example is the film Cleopatra. That film tanked. It did so bad, right? And as well it should have been, right? So you had studios like 20th Century Fox, MGM coming very close to bankruptcy, right? They're struggling, okay? Then you have things like the labor strikes, right? 1960 strikes, the Writers Guild, SAG, these people are going on strike. So a lot of things are happening at this time to where Hollywood is in decline and it's losing its vibe. Also, they done drafted half the people and sent them to the war. So who's going to be in the films? They had to figure something out, right? Okay. But even in the midst of this, Black people are pressing on because that's what we do. So in the 1950s, we started seeing the changes because more people are starting to demand inclusion. Remember, we have Brown v. Board of Ed in 1954, the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, Emmett Till is killed. There's a lot of things that are going on. And Black people are making it known, particularly through the NAACP, that they're not interested in seeing these roles where we're just domestics and there's nothing wrong with being a domestic, but we want to be more than a mammy, more than an Uncle Ben or Uncle Tom. We want to be more than just this brutish kind of person or this like person who is intellectually disadvantaged. Like they want more, and that people start demanding more. And so we start seeing folks getting cast in these roles, right? We're getting films like Harmon Jones in 1954, St. Louis Blues in 58, Porgy and Bess in 1959, right? And then we start seeing the rise of these Black stars. Black people are finally getting their own Hollywood stars, right? You got people like Sidney Poitier, Dorothy Dandridge, Harry Belafonte, and they're coming on and they're kind of challenging some of these ideas about what Blackness represents. Remember, film becomes a super important medium for shaping how people begin to think about African Americans and other Black people that are here. And I say that because we're talking about some of these folks who are absolutely either immigrants or children of immigrants. And that's always important to remember. The director, Bill Gunn, he has this really interesting quote. He said, when a good part for a Negro actor does come along, they always offer it to Sidney Poitier. Right? And that's it. That's real. That's why I have so many pictures of him. Sidney Poitier at this time is in every movie, right? He becomes the good Black guy. Kind of like how they're treating Cynthia Erivo right now, but we're not going to talk about that. Okay, but he also said if he turns it down, they rewrite it for a white actor. Okay, so many of the authentic versions of Black experience were being made, you know, were still being directed and written by white filmmakers, right? So as we go into the 60s, there's a lot of momentum around the civil rights movement. These are even more changes. We're starting to have those conversations now. People are challenging, you know, with the Oscars and the Emmys, like, why aren't you nominating and recognizing people, right? These are things that were still going on back, you know, lingering from back then. So Hollywood gets invested in expanding their cast integration, right? And then we end up getting, you know, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, right? Guess Who's Coming to Dinner becomes one of those films that it's like, remember the anti-miscegenation laws, right? That's gone. So now they can actually depict a Black man dating a white woman. But of course, he has to be this like super respectable doctor type of guy, right? He can't just be, you know, a garbage man or something like that, you know, honest working man. No, he's got to be that. And they were doing this to try to challenge and just to kind of test the waters and see how people would feel about it. All right. So I want to talk a bit about exploitation, because if we're going to talk about Blaxploitation, we have to talk about exploitation. And let me make this a little bit bigger so that you can actually see this cover. Okay, so what is exploitation? Exploitation film is a film that is chasing money. Okay, it's recognizing, the directors and the writers are recognizing that there are current trends, right? And people are going to see them. And a lot of times it's kind of sensational, it's blockbuster. Sometimes it's, you know, salacious and things like that. A lot of explicit sex. Sometimes there's drug use. Sometimes there's themes about rebellion and, you know, that kind of thing. And this is something that people want to see, right? So, you know, Hollywood is trying to adjust. Okay. So if it goes all the way back to the 1920s and kind of what they had, what were called stag films, which were really porn, right? They were usually privately screened because they went against all those rules that we were talking about, right? But people, you know, still wanted to see this. So they would have them in these places called grind houses, and you could go to the grind house and you could see these films. Black people were going to see these too, okay? And they were very much interested in them, which was interesting because of, you know, how prevalent Christianity had been among Black people, especially during the Civil Rights Movement. Black folks were sneaking to see these things too. Black folks wanted stuff that was a little more edgy too, right? But it was illegal to show these. And you could be fined $25,000 if it was discovered that you were making that, right? But there are some examples of exploitation films that you might not think about. Like, what is an exploitation film? Martial arts films. Think about when all those martial arts films were coming out with Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and other folks, right? Everybody was running. You got the Wu-Tang Clan because of those films, right? They realized how popular they were, and they just kept making them and making them. Slasher films. If you're a horror film, horror is my other favorite genre. You will notice that film series like Halloween, right? Jason, Nightmare on Elm Street, even Saw today, these would actually be part of exploitation because they're so popular and they just keep making them. As long as Final Destination, the last one just came out 20 years after the other film and we all still went to see it, okay? Outlaw biker films, right? Easy Rider, Mad Max, those are all examples of exploitation films. So, of course, we get Blaxploitation, okay? So what is Blaxploitation, right? I love that little graphic. I just think it's cool. So Blaxploitation is a subgenre of the exploitation. It's a portmanteau. If you take Black and you take exploitation, y'all, it's not that deep. Sometimes people think it's a lot deeper than what it is. It's really not, okay? And so initially, Blaxploitation films were produced for Black people, right? And it was considered Black cinema. But the stories, you know, they're telling our stories. They're telling stories of people in the inner cities, perhaps, that were going ignored. They were telling stories that Hollywood stayed away from due to respectability politics, right? But what ends up happening is they start releasing these films, and once again, Black people are running to the movies in droves. But this is a different generation. These are boomers now. Boomers are now in their teens and their 20s, and this is what they want to see, right? And again, you've got the hippies, you've got the beatniks, you've got all these different people. They don't want that old Hollywood glam. They want gritty, raw, things like that. So Blaxploitation folks really started appealing to, Black people. The other reason they did, because Blaxploitations were the first to feature soundtracks that had funk and soul music, right? So when Black people were making music and they were erasing them from the album covers and other people would cover and steal their shit like Elvis and others, Black people were like, what do we get to have that's ours? So these films were featuring these soundtracks that were bringing folks in, right? So Elvis Mitchell, who's a documentarian who made this film called Am I Black Enough for You? He said that John Kelly, who ran Warner Brothers in the 1970s, and was the CEO of Sony Pictures in the early 2000s, said to me that the dirty little secret of American cinema is that Black movies financed much of the mainstream. All we have to do to remember is the example of MGM being saved from bankruptcy by the release of Shaft, and that's not the only case. Cleopatra Jones was a huge success. Coffee, many of these films. Okay, so I just want you to sit with that for a second. Let's sit with that for a second. These white people, these white filmmakers and directors, were making Blaxploitation films, and the money that they were coming, they could make a film for $1 million and it would make $10 million, right? That's big money. That's like, like, look at how much they're making. So they were taking that money, the profits then that they were making from that, to invest in these other films that we now herald as classics, like films that are like on the Godfather level, right? Scorsese is able to get his films financed because the studios have been making money off of Blaxploitation. All right. So that's kind of like answering that question of how Blaxploitation saves Hollywood. One, it gets people back into the theaters. Two, I hate to tell people, I don't hate to tell it, I love to tell it. Black people are the culture. American culture relies heavily on Black people's interests, our artistic and cultural productions, and our money. Okay, Black people will spend money to support their own. Black people will spend money to see themselves on screen. And so, as Hollywood was dying out with that golden age, here comes Blaxploitation. And I'm telling you, they make over 60 films, right? This Blaxploitation is coming, and it's saving Hollywood from itself on the backs of Black people. Okay, that becomes tricky because there are some issues that are, there's some problematic issues there, right? So, many of the white directors were happy to participate in this, right? You got folks like Jack Hill, William Girdler, Roger Corman. They were just jumping in. They were like, yeah, we'll make whatever, right? But some of the Black artists were more likely to come in and use this opportunity. Oh, they're giving us money. Let's tell more of these stories. Then you get people like Gordon Parks and Melvin Peoples who are coming, and they're really trying to make some quality films, right? And then they're also hiring Black people behind the scenes. So we're getting, PAs, we're getting assistant directors, we're getting costumers, makeup folks that are actually able to come and be able to do this, right? But it's really interesting because, hold on one second. Why is this thing not there? Oh, sorry, y'all. That's my bad. Okay, so this is Julian. I forgot what his last name is. It was supposed to be on there. I don't know why. I hate when the technology messes up. I gotta hold on one second, y'all. I'm gonna figure this out. I forgot what his name is. Julius something. Anyway, look at me being a terrible teacher. Anyway, he was the president of the Beverly Hills Hollywood chapter of the NAACP. And he said that Blaxploitation was offensive to our communities because they perpetuated harmful stereotypes. So we start to get a split between the Black bourgeoisie that feels like these films are derogatory and things like that. And then everyone else who's like, no, we want to see this. Bill Gunn, like I said, Melvin Peoples, Gordon Parks, Sun Ra, right? Sun Ra, who really kind of gives us this like visual idea of what Afrofuturism is. They found this as a time to take their art and be able to put it in there. And Blaxploitation gave them the opportunity to explore a lot of these things. This is also an opportunity for Black actors to get work. So anytime I hear that, people talk about, well, Tyler Perry hires people, I'm like, yeah, but he don't make good films. So what are we talking about? But some people would say the same thing about Blaxploitation films. So we can have that debate all day long, okay? But let's look at some of the key things. So some of the things that we saw, let me make this a little bit bigger. Some of the things that we saw is this idea of sticking it to the man. This becomes super, 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 super important, right? You said I may be off, but I always felt like Melvin is the Godfather. He is. We're going to get into that. Sticking it to the man. That is really, really important. Revenge becomes a thing. Of course, as I've been setting up the stage for you, you understand that this is on the heels of the civil rights movement. We're in the Black Power movement. There's a lot of talk about get back. you have stolen so much from us, you have harmed us for so long, we are finally going to take what's ours. And you may be moving slow with legislation, but guess what? We can handle this in the streets. And so you see a lot of those themes throughout there. There's a lot of cultural pride, right? So we're not seeing a lot of straight hair unless somebody's putting on a wig to play, you know, play a role within a role. You're going to see a lot of afros. You're going to see a lot of dashikis and kente cloth. You're going to see a lot of references to very Black things. Black cultural iconography is present throughout. There's a lot of talk about money and success. These people are making money. Okay, a lot of them are drug dealers, pimps, whatever they are. They're making money, and they out here to get this money. And they recognize that with money and success comes power. So power and strength are also a big deal for them. A lot of use of weapons, kind of like these phallic symbols of strength. It wasn't Julian Bond. I'm gonna find it for you because I'm really upset. It actually was on my thing. I don't know why Canva didn't show it up. And my brain is holding entirely too much. I taught 2 classes earlier today, so I apologize, y'all. Sexuality. These films are dripping with sex, and Black people love it. Remember, we were sneaking to the grind houses to catch the stag films, the porn films. So we finally get this opportunity to be sexy, okay? But with that comes some kind, you know, sometimes it's exploitative. Sometimes it is misogynist. Sometimes it is, you know, anti-woman. And in rare cases where the women are the leads and the story revolves around a woman getting revenge, you know, they're treating women like whatever, because a lot of these stories are, you know, involving characters that are pimps, right? You got a film called The Mac, and it's talking about that. So yes, you're going to see women, but guess what? It ain't just Black women. It's a lot of white women are also in this space, right? This is also happening with the porn revolution of the 70s. Like, there's so much going on. I tell people all the time, if I could go back to any time in history, I want to go back to the 1970s because everything was happening. 1973, I'm actually going to work on a piece about how that's one of the most pivotal moments in American history, right? They were anti-racist. They were always talking about tackling racism, exposing corruption, exposing white people as racist, and talking about the systems and all these things like that, right? So that was really important. But one of the downsides is that they were extremely queer-phobic. I mean, there was a lot of language in there, and I'm going to play this clip for you, and I just want to warn you that there is kind of some graphic language, derogatory language, but I think it's important to kind of see this clip. So here we go.
Hold it right there, spook. Yeah, you're going to be a spook for real pretty soon. Hands up.
Don't pinch the fruit, faggot.
You watch your mouth or I'll...
No, Eddie. Later. I want to know what she's doing here.
I'll take that, big mouth.
Sure. I brought it for you, Miss Pimp. Like I said, it's a present from your faggot boyfriend. See what it is, Eddie. Well, what is it?
I don't know. Looks like a pickle jar or something.
Bring it here. Why did you kill me too? Go on, shoot! I don't want to live anymore! I know. That's the idea. The rest of your boyfriend is still around. And I hope you two live a long time. And then maybe you get to feel what I feel. Death is too easy for you, bitch. I want you to suffer.
Okay, so that is from the film Foxy Brown. Obviously, it says it right there in the corner. So what we're seeing here in that scene, right, is that scene alone. I could probably write like a 10-page paper about that scene. It's so great. We are seeing vengeance, right? They took family from her. She's taken it from them, right? This is a Black woman going up against a white woman at the height of the second wave of feminism, right? So there's a definitely a discourse happening there, right? And she wants her to suffer because that's commentary on how white women have been responsible for so many of our losses in our Black communities. Think about Emmett Till and Carol Bryant, right? So I definitely think that this speaks specifically to that dynamic. But then also she's castrating this white man, right? Think of the history of white men sexually assaulting Black women, you know, and forcing us throughout slavery and other things and getting away with it. It was legal to do this until about 5 years before this film came out, right? It was legal to rape Black women. So there's a lot packed in here, and like sisters are tired. Foxy Brown is tired, and so we see that here, right? But also this kind of it's not like she's extending mercy either. She's making sure that you endure kind of this generational suffering the way our people have suffered for generations, right? So I love to look at, you know, those kinds of things, right? So we think about some of the films that came, right? You've got Sweetback's Badass Song, right? So this is like considered the film that kind of kicks off the genre. Let me make that a little bit bigger for y'all. This is the film that kind of considered to kick off the genre, right? But a fun fact is that the soundtrack was released before the film, and the soundtrack featured Earth, Wind, and Fire. How many of you knew that? It's okay if you didn't. If it's cool. But he did not have the money to be able to promote this. So he said, I'm going to capitalize on the race music trend that we've been having, this funk soul trend that we've been having that's really popular. And I'm going to release the soundtrack, and I'm going to get people interested in that. And if you all were alive in the 90s, you understand that that often happened with films in the 90s too, right? So one of the things that's really interesting about Blaxploitation is that it starts to develop a blueprint for the technical and production side of Black cinema, right? So this idea of making sure that we drop that soundtrack, make sure, first of all, that soundtrack got to be tight. Think about Waiting to Exhale. Think about, you know, Boomerang, right? That has got to be tight. And so people get it on the radio, and people, you know, hear this like, well, what is this? Love Should Have Brought You Home. And then they're like, yeah, it's from that new film, you know, Boomerang, go see it. And then you go see it and you hear Halle Berry, love should have brought your Black ass home last night, right? So it makes that cultural connection. So this is something that's happening. But again, you're getting a band like Earth, Wind, and Fire. We are revering them now, but back then it's like, bam, here they go. They are like who they're supposed to be, right? So what's the plot of that film, right? So it's a young Black orphan. He's in Los Angeles. It's set in the 1940s. He's working as a towel boy, and one of the sex workers seduces him. So already it's problematic, right? This kind of predatory woman is exploiting an underage child. All the women in the brothel, they give him the nickname of Sweetback because they talk about his sexual prowess and his large stuff, right? And no, Melvin, no, that was not good. I actually hate this film so much. But again, kind of like Birth of a Nation, we have to recognize what it was presenting at that time, right? Then you've got the Shaft soundtrack, right? Recorded by Isaac Hayes, who you can also see right here played his own character of Truck Turner. You can go to my Professor Cinephile YouTube. I have a review of Truck Turner, which is a lesser known, you know, film, but it's important because this was who Isaac Hayes was. But he does the soundtrack for Shaft. He wins a Grammy, right, for Best Original Score for a Motion Picture. He shares a Grammy for Best Instrumental Arrangement. The theme from Shaft won an Academy Award for Best Original Song, which makes him the first Black man to win the award for that category, right? So if we're talking about impact on, you know, the Black community, like, oh my gosh, this is a first, right? And well, come on, Shaft. Come on, y'all all know the song. I ain't even got to say nothing. You know the song when you hear it, okay? And then we get to Superfly, right? That film also has a soundtrack, and this one is by Curtis Mayfield. And he ends up being someone that the Superfly soundtrack does so well. And the song Freddie's Dead sells over 1 million copies. That is unheard of for a song from a movie, right? To sell 1 million copies. So people start going after him. It becomes really important that we get Curtis Mayfield on the track. So then you get a film like Sparkle, which to me is one of the best soundtracks ever. And Curtis Mayfield is doing his thing. But then we have films like The Mac, which lean a little more in the misogyny, right? The Mac is a pimp. And so there is this glorification of pimp culture that we have to talk about. And again, if we go back to the time, what options were there for Black men, right? Police, preacher, pimp, right? There weren't a whole lot of other options, maybe postal worker if you were lucky, right? Or go to the service. So while people see it as glorifying, the exploitation of women, and I don't watch the Mac because it gets to be too much for me. But so many people go on to like idolize the Mac and use it in their cultural productions later on, particularly hip hop artists. But let's talk about the women, right? So with the sisters were there too. And actually in undergrad, so I knew I wanted to study film. And while I diverted and became a social worker, I knew I wanted to study film because I took a class called African Americans in Film and Television with the one and only Donald Bogle. And I did my final thesis on, Foxy Brown as an ancient of Black feminism. Y'all, I've been doing this for a long time, right? But in my exploration, kind of watching through all of these, and I can't get into too much detail because of time, but I will say this, that the films that had the women in it, there were still some of those themes that, we would deem as problematic, but for the most part, they were like kind of this radical grassroots version of Black feminism for people who couldn't access Black feminism in the academy, people who could not read Audre Lorde or the women of the Combahee River Collective, right? People who wouldn't know what to do with bell hooks and her early radical feminism, but they could watch these films and feel empowered. And so we're getting these leading ladies. Black women are not playing maids. They are not playing the best friend. They are the leading ladies. And this begins to change the landscape for Black women in cinema. And we have to give credit to Blaxploitation for it. Okay, so within Blaxploitation, it definitely had a strong impact on Hollywood, right? It brings these Black protagonists. It expands the representation. These films really, really, really had impact. And I just want to point out that there were horror films. Yay! So there was definitely this intersection of, because horror itself at this time, the slasher films themselves are a type of exploitation. And so you've got this overlap of this rising popularity of horror. So I'm telling you, again, the 70s are great. You got the rise of horror, you got the rise of porn, you got the rise of Blaxploitation, you got all these things happening at the same time. And so we started seeing Black people kind of remaking some of these classic stories, right? But making them Black and powerful and Black and proud, right? So if you watch Blackula, for example, which is one of my favorite films, there are themes there, not only of sticking it to the man, but there's a lot of cultural themes. A lot of Blaxploitation horror films are deeply rooted in African cultural consciousness, okay? They go back to the source. Many of them, you're talking about zombies. Well, the zombies are getting their power from African spirits, right? You got Abby, and it's like the devil is her lover now. And, you're getting all these things. Ganja and Hess is about vampires, but they become vampires through this ancient African kind of thing. So we're starting to see around this time where there is this reclamation of African cultural pride, it's starting to show up in these Blaxploitation horror films, especially because the horror films can play with time in a way that the other films are not. The other films are current and present and addressing present issues, but the horror films are able to kind of go back in time. And so that's what they end up doing. And these are some of the ones that I definitely recommend to you. Sugar Hill, Blackula, Abby, Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde, Black Frankenstein, Ganja and Hess. I love Ganja and Hess. That's Bill Gunn. It is later remade by my favorite director, Spike Lee, and it's called The Sweet Blood of Jesus. And I think that's one of his most underrated films, but I know that I'm biased. So there's that. Okay. So as we begin to wrap this up, I want to talk about modern Blaxploitation, right? So if we're talking about impact and we're talking about how things began to change. So I will call these modern blaxploitation films because of the style of them, right? But if we're considering that exploitation is kind of chasing a trend, these don't necessarily fit it. But blaxploitation created enough of a style that it almost moves out of exploitation and creates an entirely new genre of Black cinema that is no longer housed just in the 70s. It can be replicated. Now, with a lot of these films, they are set in the 70s as definitely as ways of paying homage to those folks. But there are a lot of stylistic things that are echoing and honoring how those films were made back then, right? So you get an I'm Gonna Get You Sucker. Come on. If you have not seen I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, please, please, please go watch that film. It is one of the funniest films in my lifetime. And what it does is it's Keenan Ivory Wayans, who, come on, again, I don't think that Keenan gets enough of his flowers, right? But in terms of making films, him, Robert Townsend, like they, in the 1980s and 90s, they are responsible for this kind of resurgence of Black cinema. And so he kicks it off, paying homage to all of these blaxploitation legends. I'm Gonna Get You Sucker has, you know, Isaac Hayes in it, who played Chuck Turner. It's got Jim Brown in it. It's got all these people, right? And he's bringing the whole crew back together. And it's just really, really funny because they're all old or whatever. But it's great. Then you've got Black Dynamite. Black Dynamite is completely done in the model of blaxploitation. And then you get someone like Quentin Tarantino, who's obsessed with Black people and tries to find any excuse to say the N-word. He makes Jackie Brown, which, you know, is he kind of made it like, I want to pay homage to, you know, to Pam Grier and for all the work that she's done. Pam Grier is awesome. She used to follow me on Twitter until I left Twitter. And then you get Django Unchained. A lot of people talk about Django Unchained being a spaghetti Western. And I always push back and I say, no, it's blaxploitation. It's a blaxploitation film. You could make the argument for either, but knowing Quentin Tarantino, I think that Django Unchained is blaxploitation. Then you've got Pootie Tang. Pootie Tang is the reason why I think Pootie Tang is a really fantastic example of blaxploitation is because as much as it is iconic within Black communities, it didn't really move beyond that in a massive way. But it's a film that like we hold dear to us, right? And just one of those really, really funny films. Then there were the remakes like Superfly and Shaft. Both of those were terrible. I'm sorry, don't watch those. The remake of Superfly was awful. The remake of Shaft was awful. I love Samuel L. Jackson. That man, like Brother to the Night, I love him, but that shit was terrible. And then one of the most recent ones I would say is they cloned Tyrone. They cloned Tyrone, which does not get the love that it deserves. They cloned Tyrone is blaxploitation in the style of Sun Ra. So it's got some Afrofuturism in it. It's got some stylistic things of blaxploitation. And it's just a fantastic film. John Boyega is beautiful and wonderful in this film. And I'm just like, why didn't this get more awards? It should have gotten every award, right? But again, centering Black people, sometimes they feel like when we get a little too high on ourselves, you know, they want to knock us down a peg. All right, so I want to show you this one. It's one of my favorites. Here's a teaser from one of my favorites, Fight Night, the $1 Million Heist. It was a series, though.
That left jab is finding...
On the biggest night in Atlanta history, there was only one place you had to be. And this little shindig is just the beginning. You bring together all the baddest mothers around. Something's bound to go down.
Everyone get on the fucking ground!
This whole city's about to be a crime city.
Okay, right? Let me come back on the screen so y'all can see me. Awesome. So yes, Fight Night, $1 Million Heist. Okay. When I tell y'all, I love that, and I don't like Kevin Hart, so I endured Kevin Hart, who wasn't, he was good in this one. I gotta give him his credit. I loved this. And all I could think immediately, I was like, this is not just set in the 70s. I know it's based on a true story, but this is stylistically done as Blaxploitation. Some of the interactions, David Banner's in there, fantastic actor. I don't even know how that worked out, but whatever. But there's like these scenes and the dialogue exchanges and the way that they're interacting and all those things is classic Blaxploitation. But the fact is, again, like I said, Blaxploitation now becomes this genre. So you can start to make films in that genre without it just being about the proliferation of them, which was made it the exploitation point. Okay. So some resources that you can look into: Screen Picks. It's through YouTube. It's $2.99 a month. You get access to all of these old classic films. Many of them are Blaxploitation, and some of the best Blaxploitations are on there. Also, you can go to Tubi. Tubi has a lot of old Blaxploitation films. If you've never heard of the Black Film Archive, I definitely recommend that you go, because they catalog and archive like all the titles of like pretty much every Black film ever made. Not ever made, but more like, you know, the big deal, right? So you can go back to like look at the 1920s and 30s and 40s, and you can see titles and learn about films. Even ones that have been completely lost, they still document them, and it's one of my favorite resources. Earlier I mentioned Is That Black Enough for You? That is a documentary. You can watch it on Netflix. That one kind of looks at, you know, that time period. There's a book called The Women of Blaxploitation by Yvonne Sims. And then Odie Henderson has Black Caesars and Foxy Cleopatras, A History of Blaxploitation Cinema. You can go to the Harvard Film Archive, is always a good place to look. And these are just, you know, some of the places that you can go to get some resources to learn more about Blaxploitation. So at this time, I will take any questions from those of you that are in the chat. And if you have any questions, please just type them in the chat, and then I will wait. And as you all do that, let me actually close this. As you all do that, let me stop sharing. I just want to remind you that if you got the link to this, then you got the link to the other classes. We know that people registered, and a lot of, you know, people made donations, and we really, really, really appreciate that. This school is run completely on donations. I considered doing a 501c3, but the way that the government is going, I don't want them having nothing to do with what I do. I want to be able to keep this completely independently run. And so your support and your donations means the world to me. And so thank you. And if you were not able to pay anything, thank you too, because I know what it's like for people to be like, well, I can't afford it, therefore I don't want to take the space. This is why we changed the model last year to pay what you can. And if you can only pay $0, then that's all you have to pay. That's why we send you all the links to the classes. And that way, you know, it's in your student resource. So you should have gotten the link to the student handbook, which is a Google Drive that has all these documents. You have the same logos. I mean, you have access to the logos. We definitely want you to share about these classes. Let people know, hey, I attended, you know, Dr. Taylor's class and it was wonderful. Like, talk us up so that people, you know, we can get more people to donate and sponsor us. But also we have a feedback form in there. Would love to get your feedback. I really appreciate it. We can kind of use those as testimonials to advertise for next year. And then you can go to all the other classes. Like, that's what we want. You did the full curriculum, cool. If you only signed up for mine and you're like, hey, I actually want to take some of the other classes, please do. The descriptions of the classes are still on the website, sankofasummerschool.com, and you can see the 2025 courses, read more about them, and we hope that you join us over the next 3 weeks for these workshops. You said a YouTube live notification or Gmail 2 hours before would be appreciated. So here's what we did. We set it up. I know I was late today because there was a lot going on, but my assistant set it up so that around 12 p.m. every day, you're going to get an email. If you signed up for the class that was today, or if you signed up for the full curriculum or things like that, you'll get an email as a reminder. I don't know how to set up the YouTube notifications, but maybe I'll have my assistant look into that. But we also would love for you to put it in your calendar. So if you could help us out, it's just a 2-person team over here. We're doing the best that we can, y'all. So let me see. So there are some questions. Okay, Marissa, thank you so much for this question. Where would you put Claudine and Car Wash in terms of genre? Those are great questions. So one thing I didn't get a whole lot into was that there were, we would call them straight films that were being made, right? Because of the success of people like James Earl Jones, Cicely Tyson, Sidney Poitier, Dorothy Dandridge, Harry Belafonte, studios invested in our stories too. And they weren't necessarily within Blaxploitation or things like that. I think those films kind of came a bit after the Blaxploitation boom, but also there were a lot of films that were made alongside that. And if you go back and you look at like the Oscars, and I'm trying to think of, if I have my book, it's not accessible, but there's a really good book called The Black Oscars, and it really kind of tracks all those films that were made during that time and like the ones that were nominated and things like that. So you'll see that there were other films that were being made at that time that don't really fall into that. Claudine might be romantic comedy. I don't, Car Wash, definitely a comedy. There's a lot of coming of age films that were coming out at that time. Cooley High, Car Wash, things like that. That's probably what I would put those in. Yeah. Let me see. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I appreciate it. I'm sorry that we had a couple of technical issues. I was trying my best. I've been, trying to do what have you. Let's see. Any other questions? So yeah, you got the email today. It was a little bit late. I'm sorry. That was my oversight. But going forward, you will get an email. Make sure that you add support at Sankofa Summer School to your contacts so that it does not go to spam or to trash. You will get an email every day at noon that will remind you, and it will have the direct link to the YouTube to come and watch it. Okay. I really do hope you all come out and support our instructors. They've put a lot of work into it. Some of them are kind of nervous. So you're going to come and show them some love. Not everybody's experienced, but half of our folks are professors and they're used to these kinds of things. So I think you're going to have a really good time. Can people still sign up for the remaining classes? Well, if you have the link to this, you don't have to worry about signing up. You should go to your student handbook. In the welcome email that was sent out this weekend, there's a link to the student handbook, and in the student handbook is the class list. Okay, so you should be able to see what the class list is. Okay, these are going to remain unlisted. Okay, so you notice if you go to Sankofa Summer School, you don't see them listed on our YouTube. They're going to remain unlisted until the entire session is over, and then we will make them public. So they will be available in perpetuity. Okay, that is what we are about. We want people to be able to see these for as long as possible. Okay, this is liberation through education. And so I'm hoping that what you learned from this particular workshop on Blaxploitation maybe changes your mind a little bit about Blaxploitation, or maybe just gives you a little more insight into why these films were being made, giving you the context of what was going on in Hollywood, and maybe just makes you feel a little more empowered that Black people saved Hollywood. Let's put what the young people doing? Black people saved Hollywood. Okay. So you said, are there any? Oh, this is a good one. Are there any Blaxploitation films or actors recognized by the Academy? Was their art and influence ever acknowledged in the mainstream film industry? Absolutely, absolutely. I think that Quentin Tarantino making Jackie Brown was basically a collective honoring of the fact that, Pam Grier as Foxy Brown was life-giving. Again, Isaac Hayes goes on to be, he did Truck Turner, which, was a lesser known film, but he goes on to be, this super popular star. He ends up in, South Park, one of the biggest shows ever. He's making all this music and doing those things. Trying to think. There's a few that I believe are in the Library of Congress. And I think some of them were winning awards, like some of the small artsy awards that were coming out, because some of them are terrible. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, but a lot of films are terrible. Like a lot of films that white people make are absolutely terrible and they keep getting made. But some of them were actually like really good. So, and you look at a Bill Gunn, well, also, I mentioned him, but I didn't get into depth. Gordon Parks, right? We know Gordon Parks as this photographer, but like this man was making, participating in this genre as well. And it goes on to inspire people like Spike Lee, right? So without Blaxploitation, we don't get a Spike Lee, right? I wish Tyler Perry would be inspired by some damn Blaxploitation. Maybe he could just write okay, you know what? That's not what we're doing here. That's not what we're doing here. All right, so I thank you all very much. We're at 4 minutes over. our time, but that's okay. I really appreciate you. I will actually be here every night introducing people and welcoming them. So, you'll probably see my face going forward for the rest of the times. And we hope to see you there. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate your support. Like, I'm probably going to go cry right now because this is my passion project. This is probably, outside of having my son, this is one of the most important things I've ever done in my life. So thank you all so much showing up. We had like 32 people in the class. I love you all so very much. And I'll see some of you tomorrow. Bye.